Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us again for another episode of the Salvation Foundation podcast series. Today with us, Kara, founder of the Salvation Foundation, and Sean, father of two 6-year-old twin boys.
Hey guys, thank you both for being here. Today I wanted to dive a little further into the different types of sex trafficking, and one of the reasons that we have Sean here as a father, I mean we're both parents, but ultimately a lot of the conversations that I'm having are with people as parents or people that are not parents but have children around them and in their lives. They don't really understand the full scope of what sex trafficking is. So here with us is Sean. I wanted to ask you, you're a dad, you have two boys, they're 6 years old. I'm sure that you have either been aware of the fact that sex trafficking happens, but even more so now, with everything that's coming to the surface and the awareness that's being spread around by, organizations like myself and just, kind of through social media, because we know that mainstream media doesn't really cover it.
Right.
But can you share with us what you know about sex trafficking?
What I know, I wouldn't say I know a whole lot. I think I have more ideas or thoughts of what happens or what I think happens, but as far as what I actually know, I would have to say it's probably pretty slim. I know that I'm scared.
Yeah.
So what does that actually mean on a daily basis? When you have them, you go shopping, you go to the gym, so you have a life that goes around your children.
Yeah.
How aware are you of what could happen on a daily basis?
I'm more aware now, especially within like the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, I'm 6'3", 230 pounds. So I would probably be someone that wouldn't be looked at as, prey, or someone that would be an easy or hard fight, easy fight. Is that what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I've always kind of been very naive when I've had my children in thinking that I wouldn't be a target until, a lot of this has surfaced and I've researched more about it. Now I'm very aware. Now, before I would, probably one of the least favorite things to do as a parent is to strap your kid into their car seats. Just getting them buckled up and that whole thing, and having your hands full and getting them in the car. So I would just let them jump in, do their thing. Now I don't even get into my car until they're in. And even stores, when it comes to them holding my hand or staying close, I'm very more aware of it now than I ever have.
And I've even posted videos on social media that show just how fast it can happen. I mean, literally, walking through the grocery store, for example, walking through the grocery store, you turn away from your child that's right next to you to go and grab something off the shelf, put it down into the cart, and they're gone. That's that fast.
Yeah, those videos, I'm sure a lot of people can relate, are haunting.
They are.
And that's what really woke me up to that is, the people who are in that business, they're already prepared. It's like the same thing if we go and do anything specific. We're ready for that night. We're ready for that evening. We're ready for that event. We're prepared. They're prepared to do what they're going to take out at that time.
But we as parents are not prepared,
right,
or are ill prepared because there's no awareness around what really happens.
Right.
So part of the reason why we wanted to have this podcast, and we'll go into this a little bit further, but my goal here at the foundation has always been to spread awareness, aid in the prevention and the rescue of these children, prevention of sex trafficking, and part of the prevention and rescue is also taking down the predators as well. But then, and then focusing on the rehabilitation. But as far as the awareness side of things, I think our first line of defense is absolutely the awareness of what's really going on out there. So there are so many people that are still in a mindset or mentality or in a state of belief or disbelief, rather, that this is even happening. And you might be able to entertain that children are getting abducted and that children are being molested because you may have been through that yourself, or someone that has been through a similar situation. But to really take the information that's being thrown around, when it comes to different things, and I'm going to go through the list really fast, but to take in this information and then process it. There are many different reasons why people aren't processing this information, and I've had these discussions with many different people throughout this awakening, if you will. But there are some people that have so much on their own minds and hearts and on their own plates that they just can't handle anymore. So whether it's, they've experienced their own traumas or abuses, or whether they are in a dark place because they're depressed, or whether, it's a financial burden, or, lack of employment or loss, whatever we are carrying, many people can't even barely make it through the day with the weight of what they're dealing with now. So to try and not only accept that this is going on, but then learn about the severity of what's really happening. I understand that it's extremely hard for some people to just believe that this is happening. So when we start going into the different types of trafficking that fall under human trafficking, with attention and focus on sex trafficking, much less child sex trafficking, the further that you get down the line of all of the different things that are happening right now, the harder it is to not only acknowledge it, but then to actually believe that there is such evil. And to the extent that the evil is happening, most can't believe it. So what I'm here to do is to tell you that that's understandable, but at the same time, I encourage you to do the research and educate yourself, even if it's enough to just know the different types of things that fall under sex trafficking, so that when you are able to take a little more information, or you are able to put a little more attention and focus and dedicate a little bit more time to it, so that you can process it over time, you'll be able to, and you'll have a sufficient knowledge base of where to start, and then you can go down, I don't like to use the term the rabbit hole, but you can go down that path of self-education so that you can really understand. And here's another problem that lies within the magnitude of child sex trafficking. All of the rumors that are being labeled as conspiracy theory, they are true. And the reason why they are labeled as conspiracy theory is because those that are involved with these practices and these evils don't want you to know that they're happening and they're true. But I'm here to tell you that they are, with my firsthand knowledge, dealing with survivors on a daily basis and walking them through the recovery stages of getting through these severe traumas and abuses and the violence and the PTSD and the flashbacks and the sleepless nights and the self-harm and the suicidal tendencies. When you're working with these people every single day and you're hearing these stories one after another, and there are adults that were trafficked as children, but they're all over, and they've been trafficked in different places in this country, and there are also ones that are outside of the country that I'm in communications with. When you hear these stories about the memories and about the abuses, and they're resurfacing and they're sharing what happened to them, it's not just a conspiracy theory. It's no longer a rumor. It's no longer some crazy story that your crazy aunt told you. No, this is real and it's happening. And the similarities with these stories, although there's never a story that's the exact same with these survivors, but the similarities of the stories, one, how they're trafficked, certain abuses, ritualistic abuses that fall under, Satanism and they're all very, very similar in the way that they're carried out and conducted. So jumping into this really quick, let me ask you another question, Sean. What is your overall idea of what trafficking is? What does it look like to you, or what do you understand it to be?
Well, the first word that comes to my mind is kidnapping.
Mm-hmm.
That's like just what the first word is. But for me, as I would say, just an average person and just an average parent, what really resonated for me when it came to this was always following the money, and the fact that this is a business for people. And not only is it a business, but it's a multi-billion-dollar business. So for anybody to think that this isn't happening, I would really encourage you to follow the money.
Right.
Number one. So so once I looked at it from that lens, it really opened my views into really what it was. Now I think of it as bad as it, it's hard to say this, but I think of it as a business.
Well, that's exactly what it is. So, whether it's drugs and arms or it's child trafficking, it's an illicit enterprise. It's an illicit business. And the people that are at the very top of these businesses, it's a structure. So they have a formal structure of employees, essentially, that are hired to do specific jobs, from the people that do the abductions, the ones that groom. And I'm not kidding when I say that they will groom one person for 2 years, one child for 2 years. You think about what happens in our lives in 2 years, and then you start thinking about the value of a child that is sex trafficked to a trafficker is hundreds of thousands of dollars per child per year. So for them to invest that type of time, it's a no-brainer for them.
Well, who can afford that? Rich people.
Yes.
So,
good point.
I mean, at that point, it's, even like you had mentioned, no matter what the business is, drugs, the more valuable or the harder it is to get, whatever that product is, whether it be a human or a drug or a cell phone, there's a certain caliber or level of person that can afford that. And with that comes protection, connections, and like you said, building the necessary fence or whatever around them to make sure that they're protected and not getting their hand burnt by getting caught.
Right. Well, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and even when they do, you've got other levels of protection anyways. That's how far it goes, right? I think the difference when we talk about drugs and weapons, the whole satanic aspect that people are not necessarily aware of, right, is something that is very particular to trafficking and to sex trafficking with children. And that's the part that's the most frightening, is it goes beyond business. It goes to power. Let's think about this for a moment. These are people who genuinely believe that they can sacrifice human lives to better their own. Let's think about that for a second.
Well, and not just that, but there's so many people that are in disbelief, that the elite are involved, or you hear phrases like cabal and deep state and Illuminati and celebrities, musicians. There's the cognitive dissonance that we've mentioned before, but it's a disbelief because you grow up with certain children, and as they grow from a child star to an adult, you almost feel an emotional bond to them, so you look to them for these things. But not unbeknownst to us, they are Satanists and they believe in these things. But if you go back and just look up Satanism, look up satanic ritual abuse, there's an entire book on different types of satanic ritual abuse. And one of the things that they believe in is child sacrifice. One, for the purity of the soul. Two, for other. We won't go into the details of any of the satanic ritual abuses that they do, or what it consists of, but it is torturing children, child sacrifice, child rape, and cannibalism. So I would encourage you to do that research and then follow the money, just like Sean said. I believe it was last year or the year before, the numbers that were published on the revenue of the human trafficking enterprise is $150 billion. So if you look at $150 billion, how many children does it take to equate to that? And that's human trafficking. I believe that child sex trafficking or sex trafficking is a $99 billion industry. And mind you, those are only numbers that are estimated.
That's what we know.
There's numbers. I mean, it's an illicit enterprise. So much of that activity is hidden because it's illegal. So imagine what the real numbers would look like.
So people aren't writing that off on their taxes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So
I
let
mean,
me run down just so that you guys can make note of this, and I'll kind of go through them quickly. The different types of sexual abuse and sexual violence that make up trafficking are typical abuses: the sexual abuse, molestation, sex trafficking, rape, grooming, forced and or survival prostitution, mind control, MK Ultra, torture, organ harvesting, child sacrifice, cannibalism, murder, bestiality, satanic ritual abuse, and then we go into the porn industry. And with the porn industry being, a gateway into trafficking, also used as a disguise, which in many countries, prostitution is used as a cover or as a disguise for illegal prostitution or forced prostitution. The porn industry is the same thing. So, going into the porn industry and everything that's online, the amount of children that are on porn videos that you don't even know about is something that would probably make you sick. And then we go into child sexual abuse material, which is the correct term. There is no such thing as child pornography. It's child sexual abuse material. And that is sometimes sold online. I say sometimes, that's a very light term. It's sold extensively online, and the increase in that is 500% since COVID started. A lot of places, people will have children that they live stream abuses and torture and rape in certain dark web rooms, chat rooms, and these people that are tuning in, think about it. Why is there such a demand for this? Because our society has been so desensitized to what normal sexual intimacy is supposed to look like, and why and how. Well, we've been conditioned and desensitized by mainstream media, by these music videos that you're seeing, by the type of content that's being shown on movies and on television programs. They're called programs for a reason. It's programming you. So, when you take into consideration all of these different factors, you understand why this problem is as big as it is. You're looking at different communities that are normalizing pedophilia and saying that it's a sexual preference, but under no circumstances is pedophilia a sexual preference, or is it okay? Sorry, my cell phone should be on night mode. So when we're talking about all of these different types of avenues that fall under sex trafficking, like I said, it's hard enough to stomach that these sexual abuses are happening to children by itself. But then, you start to consider, with conversations I've had with other organizations, I can't tell you, it's really the coolest thing. I've been able to align with multiple different organizations, not just here in Southern California. There's Tennessee and Florida, and we're talking about Haiti and about going to Haiti and doing some work over there too before the end of the year. But in understanding how this business model works, what's really going on and what we're up against is so unfathomable. I almost don't even know where to start with helping you guys on this path But all I can do is give you the information and encourage you to continue to look into it, and also caution you in the fact that this is such dark material, and the information that's out there is very, very, very hard to stomach. So pace yourself, please. But I'm putting these videos on YouTube, and we're spreading the awareness, and I encourage you to spread it by sharing this video. But then also, if you have questions, feel free to visit my website and email us your questions. And if there are things that you need answered, we will address all of those concerns. Or if you're not understanding, then just comment on this video after you're done watching it. But I encourage you to continue to look into these things, and just know that some of it may seem completely out of this world, and you will just deny that this is happening. But I promise you, this is happening, whether you want to believe it or not. So now, my call to action is educate yourself. And then what do I do about it with that? Okay, Kara, I educated myself. Great. Now I feel like I can't even do anything about it now that I know about all this. Well, we have a lot of stuff that's happening, and it's too much to share this, but I can tell you that we are working on providing software that will scrape and create data and compile data that will then be handed to law enforcement agencies. And I am providing the software to local law enforcement agencies and anti-human trafficking task forces as we speak right now. So we are going to come together, and essentially the foundation is going to be a bolt-on to what law enforcement is currently doing right now. We're just providing extra support so that we can track down more predators and identify the child sexual abuse material that's floating around on the internet. The more that we can take that down and stop it from being accessed, and hopefully be able to identify IP addresses, whether or not they're blocked, whether or not they're moving all around the world, and track down the people that are purchasing and selling this material, and hopefully be able to identify where those kids are being kept, where those kids are being hurt and abused, and rescue kids in the process. So there are many different facets of what that looks like in general. And our focus is really just to make sure that we, take down as many predators as we can, and, working with law enforcement and making those arrests. The goal is to harshen those prosecutions with them so that they're not hurting other children again, because they're locked up for life. That's the goal. I mean, I'm sure that we can all agree on the fact that that's not enough, but at least they won't hurt anyone else. So that's just part of what we're doing right now, and where your donations are going is to further those efforts completely. We're still working with survivors daily. We are providing them with many different holistic modalities of therapy and rehabilitation and resources, and we're pulling people in from all over. We have a great group of people that's in Encinitas down in San Diego here in California, and we're all coming together to really tackle this, from here, home base, but working with people all around so that we can really spread the outreach and help as many people as possible. So just so you guys know, the shop button on the website, salvationfoundation.com, went live today. So you guys can go get your hats and your shirts, and we have new releases that are coming, so you'll be able to pre-order those. And we're also going to be adding sweaters as well here with the upcoming winter months. Staring us right in the face, although it's kind of hard to believe with 110 degree weather outside right now. So is there anything else you want to ask or add?
I mean, again, I think the key word every time we have these podcasts is the word unfathomable, right? What's the expression? The greatest trick the devil ever played is to make people believe that he didn't exist.
Yeah.
Right? And yes, you will see things that are going to seem so out there that you're going to go down the road of, oh, that's going to be a movie, because this is how we've been desensitized, right? With all these movies that are so incredibly violent and treat all these subjects, and that's kind of, people have to realize that it's done for a purpose, right? It's to kind of go, look, shiny object over here, it's a movie. So when you see something like that, it's easy.
It's not really real because
Exactly.
it's a movie, and
Exactly.
let's downplay it as much as possible so that even if people do believe that it's real, their depiction of what that real is completely altered, and it's not even close to accurate as to what really happens. Let me just tell you another thing so you guys really understand. You know, when there's that statistic of 800,000 children going missing each year, that number is not accurate either. You know, like we said, that's an average number of children that goes missing in an illicit enterprise. Again, so there are so many that fly under the radar. There are, believe it or not, places where they actually have these hostages, these children that grow up in the trafficking world that become pregnant, and either they're forced to have these abortions or they do have children, but then the children, as soon as they're born, they go right into the same abuses. So there are so many children that are not accounted for, that are going missing, and that are in the sex trafficking trade, that are, you know, forced to be sex slaves. And, you know, I know that we've talked about this before, but the average lifespan is anywhere from 2 to 7 years for these children, given their abuses that they're suffering. But so many of the children, they are abducted, some are groomed, some are runaways, but there are so many children that are trafficked in and out of the United States that come from the foster care system. CPS, social services, foster homes, orphanages. They are children that nobody really seems to care about, and it's easy for one to just kind of disappear. And that's where we need to focus our attention. And I will speak more about that later. I will also speak more about the Holistic Wellness Rehabilitation Center that I've mentioned before, and the facilities that will be provided to children that have been sexually abused, trafficked, molested. There's a lot to be said about what's happening there. So I have a lot of goals and a very, very, very big vision. And the more that I dive into this, and the more that I'm becoming aware and educated about the things that are happening in other countries, like the Philippines, like Thailand, like India, you know, every country, every major, you know, Africa, Europe, there are systems and companies and organizations that are at the top of these trafficking rings in each of these places. And they, like I said, they have people that their downline of employees, if you will, goes into the poorest places in the world, but is also in the most ultra wealthy places of the world. And I think that will be our next podcast, is talking about what trafficking looks like globally, so that you guys can truly understand the differences of third world country trafficking to elite trafficking. So with that, you know, I don't know what else I can really share right now, because I think that was a lot of content. I think that was a lot for people to kind of go through and, you know, work through. But like I said, I encourage you to reach out to me, you know, through the website. Shoot me an email and ask me your questions, and I'll be happy to add them to our FAQ page that we're putting together right now.
So, Sean, half an hour later, first impressions of what you've just heard today.
It's all good information. So for me, I've started to kind of do a little bit more research. So this is like, you kind of intended it to be like more of a basic overview, so you can just get started. So for me, it was more of a reminder, you know. But all I can think about is, since we've been born, this whole entire planet, it's good versus evil. That's like the whole basis of life, you know. And so I just encourage people to focus on protecting. If you don't know where to start with just protecting your family. And go from there.
And I think something very important too, And I only know this because we've talked about it, right? About how when some victims come out and start talking to people, how quickly people are to dismiss them as, oh, this is not true, or you're too difficult, I can't deal with you, and stuff like that. So, and I think even from the law enforcement perspective, right, some of them actually are getting prosecuted for prostitution, even though they're absolute victims.
Right.
I mean, they've been kidnapped,
That's true.
thrown into it, and now they're the ones who are getting prosecuted by the law
Right.
for doing something that they didn't want to do in the first place.
Right.
I mean,
Well, and one of the things that we're doing is I have a couple of girls that are working on pulling together and gathering data that we will then be putting into a pamphlet / educational material, and that's going to be rolled out to begin with to our local school districts so that teachers can be informed. Because if you think about who children spend most of their time with, aside from their parents, it's teachers. It's well, under normal circumstances, outside of COVID. But it's teachers. So our first line of defense for our children is teachers. So if teachers really understand what to look for and how to identify and the right questions to ask to a child that has been threatened with their life or continued abuse, if they speak up, there are many things to be said as to what we can do to protect those children, even if it's their parents that are the abusers. Because one point I'd like to make is that so much of the time, that abuser or that person that's selling that child is their parents, one of their parents, a family member, or a friend. So the likelihood of it being someone that they know is very, very high. And again, to the normal mind, to the normal sound mind, trying to fathom that a parent is abusing their child sexually, it's hard to believe. It's also hard to believe that a child would sell their parents, or that a parent would sell their children for sex, but it is absolutely happening, and it is absolutely true. And when you look into the eyes of a survivor that can barely speak about this because of their fear and how much they were groomed to believe that if they spoke a word, they'd be killed or their family would be killed, you believe it. You absolutely believe it because they have nothing to lose but their life. So to have the mindset that a survivor would be lying,
and even at that point, to lose their life would to them would almost be like a relief.
It would, and
so
so many survivors say that. So many survivors say,
so
I'd rather be dead than live with these memories and these nightmares every single night, night after night. I have survivors that have to take tranquilizers just so that their body will go to sleep, even though their mind doesn't go to sleep. So at least they're getting rest and they don't have insomnia to where they're up all night, but they still have the nightmares and they relive that torture over and over. And I just, I think I have bad dreams. I think that the abuses and the sexual violence that I've suffered is bad. And then I'm sitting here in front of these survivors that have been through satanic ritual abuse and have been tortured and have witnessed torture of other children that was so severe that the children died from their injuries right in front of all the other children that were forced to watch. And it really starts to make you realize that even us, the ones that have suffered from sexual violence and abuse, it's not as bad as it could be, or it could have been, because there are people that I work with that I don't even know how they survived, and they absolutely believe that they should have died and had no idea why they survived either. And I don't even know how they did, but by the grace of God, they have. And so I'm thankful because they're coming forward, and the amount that I'm learning to help other children, and the fact that I share that I'm going to use their stories as fuel and as a knowledge base for other people to become aware of this, gives them hope that maybe, just maybe, their suffering will help other children or take down other predators. So, that's my motivation day after day after day, is to make sure that their suffering was going to be turned around to use for good. So I think that's a lot of information for for one podcast. So I want to thank you both, Sean and Francois, for joining me again on another podcast, and I look forward to bringing you guys more information. Like I said, feel free to reach out and send in your thoughts and your comments and what you'd like to hear about on the next one, and we will have another one to you in a few days. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you soon.